Morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining me this morning. So probably to introduce you, I'm actually going to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves because you know yourselves better than I do. So I'm going to start off with Melissa. If you want to quickly introduce yourself. Also, where you're from, because we've got a rather large time zone span on this stream. And how you got started in conference speaking.
Yeah, so I'm Melissa Houghton, and I'm a lead consultant at Telstra Purple, and I'm currently based in Melbourne, Australia, but I'm originally from California, so I have a little bit of an accent here as well. And I started conference speaking sort of mid-2019, so it's only been about a year and a half or so. And been doing a whole bunch of virtual talks over the last year in 2020, which has been really cool.
Awesome. Next, Rabia.
Hey, so my name is Rabia, and I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft. Previously, I was also a Microsoft MVP. I have to say I'm very recent in public speaking. It's been only about a year and a half since I started off, but I'm sure I can give you a good story on it. That's my background. I live in Brisbane, here in Sunshine State. My ethnical background is from India. So yeah, excited.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Rabia. Hopefully you'll also be able to give some excellent advice to people who are just starting out as well,
Yes.
seeing as you've literally just gone through this yourself.
Yeah.
And lastly, Kim, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got started?
Kia ora. My name is Kim. I live here in Brizzy, but I'm not from Brisbane. I'm a Māori from New Zealand. And how I got started, it was 2019, and I drank way too many Mai Tais and said yes. So that would be my one tip to anybody: don't get drunk. It was exciting and overwhelming. Such a growth thing that, my goodness, if I could do it, anyone can do it.
Excellent. I wish I had that excuse. So I still blame that I still claim that I was tricked into starting to speak at conferences. Unfortunately, I didn't even have any mind-altering substances involved. I just kind of got myself into it. So I can't even use that excuse. So I'm just going to start off. If you can tell a little bit about how you got started, a little bit about what happened, whether that was having a couple too many drinks with a friend who convinced you to do it, or in my case, I gave in to a friend who continued to ask me and said, well, what's the worst that could happen? So a little bit about how you ended up starting to speak at events. Rabia, we might start with you.
Oh, sure. So I have, for the past couple of years, I've been involved in open source contributions, and that's probably the only public work that I did with the community. And the more I did, the more I found out that in Microsoft 365's developer space, the community is pretty awesome, and they support each other in a big way. And then seeing that, I was a bit intrigued to do more than just pushing code into GitHub. So I reached out to a couple of folks so the thing is, you have to actually find out your local community. So I knew a couple of MVPs because they were giving, especially on Twitter, they were giving their presentations and demos and stuff. And I reached out to a couple of them who then introduced me to the user groups. So this Meetup app is also something that I installed. And then I got to know what's happening in the dev space around in the community. So that's where it all started. I got in touch with one of the people who run the user group, and then I asked a question if I could probably speak about one of the topics that I was really it was really hot at that moment. It was something on developing stuff for teams, and then they were like, yeah, we want fresh blood. And that was it. That was the start. So I was like, it was really simple. I first contemplated, I thought maybe this is not the right time. I was also really shy because of the audience. Now I am comfortable speaking to a group of people, but when I came to Australia, this is a new audience and native English speakers. So I had sort of like a self-imposed inhibition on reaching out, which I overcame because they were supportive and they said, doesn't matter, as long as your content is pretty amazing, that's all that matters. And yeah, that's where I started off. And yeah.
No, that's really awesome to hear how you're able to get started, and that this is one of the really amazing things that we have in Australia and New Zealand is we've got such amazing communities which are so supportive for new speakers, which is exciting to have. Melissa, what about you? What is your journey getting into this? How did you get started?
Yeah, so I would attend user groups and different conferences and stuff, but was always a bit intimidated to apply and speak myself. But I was doing sort of smaller presentations at work internally. And yeah, so people sort of told me about how to get into conference speaking, and actually attended the Global Diversity CFP Day in 2019, which is the first year I got into conference speaking. And so that really helped me sort of understand what it takes to get into conference speaking and sort of help some of my fears as well. So it's really great for everyone who's on the stream here to be doing this right now. And then after that, I actually applied to Yao New Voices in Tech, which is a speaker training program for gender diversity. And I was lucky enough to be accepted into that. And so that was like training for speaking. And then from that, I got my first actual conference speaking gig, thanks to Michelle from Yao, who's speaking later today. And after I did my first one, I was like, wow, this is actually really cool. And it wasn't as daunting as I initially thought. And the communities are all really great and supportive. So from there, it just kind of snowballed and I was applying everywhere and yeah, getting into places, which was awesome.
Yeah, that New Voices in Tech training program is an amazing. So I also got to be part of that training program. I believe possibly the year before you did it, Melissa. Yeah, awesome. So can definitely confirm that that's an amazing program. We'll be sharing a list of resources later on the stream. So I'll make sure that information about that program's in there as well, because it's really awesome experience to get to be able to do that. Kim, what about you? What's your story? Despite having a few too many drinks and agreeing to something you regretted the next morning.
Oh, well, my pathway is a little bit different to the girls because I don't come from a technical background at all. I have no university degree. I'm self-taught, and I learned in my late 40s. So that's why I said, if I can do it, literally anybody can do this. I went to my first ever conference in down in Melbourne, and that's where I met the speaker, and she said you should give it a go. So I applied, similar to, I think, what Melissa did. It was like a mentoring program, and I honestly thought no one would take me. Like I really had no belief in myself at all. And I actually couldn't even run workshops or anything. So I was a tester and a BA, and I struggled even just doing workshops and standing in front of my own team. So then literally within a week, I had a response that somebody was interested in mentoring me. And I applied, and we worked together, and we kind of did applications, and I got some really hard feedback from some of the rejections. It was kind of like, but my mentor was wonderful. Andrew just kept going, get up, keep going. And then I got accepted by one, and it was Selenium in Tokyo. So my first ever was speaking at a conference with engineers, and I'm not an engineer. I'm pretty technical, and now, but I did it because I was working in blockchain. And, as far as I'm concerned, blockchain is a piece of cake, but most people find it difficult. But, for me, it's just run of the mill. So I think one of the things, Amy, is don't underestimate what you know, because I always did. And then when I went out and spoke to people, it's surprising how much people don't understand blockchain or cryptocurrency or, you know, what you use it for and how. So, yeah, I suppose having a bit of faith in yourself was the one that you needed. I needed, and I got that by this lady giving me a kick up the you know what to move. So yeah, that's my story.
I remember hearing your story when we first started planning this, and it was incredible. I always thought, so my first conference, which was one of my first talks, was actually a keynote, and I was freaking out about that. I was like, this is 0 to 100. And then your first conference was in Tokyo. That just crazy.
It was crazy. And I'd tell you something too. I'd never traveled by myself. Like I'd never done anything by myself. So it was so many firsts in my late 40s. So that's why, you know, age, all of that doesn't matter in tech. What matters is your brains. That's all that matters, you know. So it was astounding is all I could say.
Yeah, that's really amazing that you've been able to do that. You did touch on another point that I wanted to cover with this, which is how did you deal with your first rejection? Any advice for people for when they look, rejection is a part of life. As much as we try and make conference speaking sound amazing, rejection is something that will happen to everybody at some point in time. We submit to a lot of conferences. You're gonna get rejections at time. Do you have any advice for people on how to deal when those inevitable rejections do come through?
I always try to take it as a learning experience. So, you know, if they do give you feedback on your abstract or your talk, look at that and then see maybe how you can iterate on that. Or if they don't give you feedback, ask your friends like, hey, how could I improve this so it gets accepted next time? And also just applying to several places, because you know you're not going to get into all of them. So if you only did one, then it can be a bit more disappointing if you don't get accepted. But if you're reaching out to several places, hopefully you are accepted into one. And if you're not, then iterate on it and take it as learning as how can you improve for next time, and then get it accepted next time.
I suppose I think of the Maori word kia kaha eho. So stay strong. Because for me, it was quite an emotional journey. It was opening myself up to something I wasn't comfortable with in any shape or form. And then having feedback from complete strangers who didn't know the pain and agony that I put into and the hours that I put into that presentation. It was difficult. I won't beat around the bush, but you're right, Melissa, taking it on board, looking at it as a learning experience, but not giving up. That's the thing. Never give up. Just keep going.
Yeah, I have never actually taken a rejection personally for presentations. Maybe alone I would, but no, not for presentations. Maybe because I'm also new and I haven't faced a lot of rejections. So maybe that. And I also was really ambitious when I was applying for these big conferences. So I was half expecting it. And I also know there's a big pool of people who are really doing above and beyond for these things. And I don't know how they feel about rejections, but I was pretty okay, I would say. So when you start off, you are bound to get rejections. And I think that's a natural process.
Yeah, I remember when, same as you said, Rabia, is when I started off, I expected, I applied with the assumption that I wasn't going to get in. So it didn't sort of matter too much when I got rejected from these things. But then I had a stream of about 3 or 4 conferences that accepted me. And I was on a high, and I went, this is something I can do. Like I'm obviously really good at this. Like I can do this. And for me, it was the first rejection that came after that. It was I'd gone up on a high, and then that next rejection. So people always ask how you deal with your first rejection. And I always say the problem isn't your first rejection, because you're expecting that. The problem is the first rejection after your first acceptance. When you're on a high, that one was really, really fun, really brings you back to earth a little bit, but it's something we all deal with. Now, probably one thing I would like to know is whether or not you always enjoyed speaking, and is this something that you always thought you wanted to do? I remember when I was in high school, I hated doing presentations. Even at uni, I hated doing presentations. I did not like speaking in front of a crowd. So it was kind of a shock when I discovered that I actually love speaking at conferences, and standing on a stage in front of 200-300 people is something that I actually get a thrill out of doing, whereas standing in front of 10 of my high school students, I hate it. Is this something that you always knew you wanted to do?
Who's going
Anyone
first? Yeah, I would go first because I know about the high and the low you're talking about, Amy. Because for me, it's always like this roller coaster ride that I really hate, but I also want to try. So every single public speaking, I would say, not just a presentation, a public speaking where I'm talking to a group of my teammates, when I'm presenting an idea or anything, I have this rush, but I think I really like it. I don't know if it's odd, but I really like the rush. And before that happens, even before this event happened, like 5 minutes before, I was shaking inside. And I know that feeling is really good. And after I'm done, I'm like, I did it. And I like it. So I probably am a bit passionate about speaking, and I always loved it. Although I hated just a few minutes before it. I'm like, why did I do this? Why did I do this? I'm like shaking, but that's totally fine, I think. And I really like it.
I feel like we're all a little bit adrenaline junkies on the inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Yeah. Go, Melissa.
Sorry. Yeah, for me, I was never big on public speaking. And even now I still get super nervous beforehand and during. It's probably good we're virtual because I'm actually sweating quite a bit at the moment. And I have to, just sort of remember to calm myself down as it's happening. But once I got into it and started doing quite a bit, I had that adrenaline rush that we're talking about. And it's actually interesting because in high school, I did drama for a little bit. So I did do a little bit of public speaking there, but then all throughout uni and like the second half of high school, I didn't do any sort of public speaking or anything speaking in front of people. And there was a time towards the end of uni where I had to go present to a room full of my friends. And I was so incredibly nervous and shaking the whole time just because I hadn't done it in a very long time. So I think part of it is just getting used to it and getting familiar with it. And that helps you get more comfortable the more you do it.
I guess with me, public speaking, I don't know, I look at it as a teaching method. Like it's a way to impart knowledge and to help other people on the journey. So it's telling my story. So, and I suppose that's what I look at it as. And part of that too is, if I can help someone else, then that is a good thing for me. So that's the only reason I get up. I don't particularly like it. I'll be very honest. And, I'm a BA and I run workshops, and I don't like doing those either. But it's all about taking people on journeys, giving back. It's really important to me to give back to the tech community, give back to people that have been generous to me along my journey. And I guess paying it forward. So that's really what it's all about for me. Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear the different points. So we're not all adrenaline junkies. Some of us are adrenaline junkies, and Kim just likes to give back to the community, which is totally fair.
Wholesome.
I ride motorbikes. Are you kidding me? I'll show you my girl.
Yeah. Now, probably if we've touched on some important points, but what is your favorite part about speaking at conferences? Ignoring the rush of adrenaline that we get when we get off stage. Other than that, what is your favorite part of speaking at conferences? Kim, do you want to start?
Oh, God, yes, I know what it is. You know what it is? When you're looking out to the audience and you see someone go click. Oh my God, I so want to just do the dance. Hey, I can literally see them in their head go, I got it. And I tell you, that is so powerful. And then afterwards, the talking and making new friends, and then you realize it's a global thing. It's not just Brizzy, it's not just, Australia, and you're part of a community. It really is like being part of a family. It's like mind-blowing.
Yeah, for me, it's the same. It's the interaction with the audience that's pretty amazing, because I know when I'm talking about a concept, and I know when someone asks me a question that's pretty spot on, I'm like, okay, I did something. I did get through some of the messages. So I'm really happy when there is an interaction from the audience. It is terrifying. I'll be very honest with you, like what you don't know what questions to expect, but it's also at the same time sort of like giving you a feedback that, hey, okay, I'm at least trying to understand the concept from you. So audience feedback is something that I really love in between when I'm doing presentations.
Yeah, and I would just echo what you both said, and really just connecting with all the different people, and seeing, especially if they come up and tell you, yeah, that what you said had an impact on them in some way, whether they learned something or they just really enjoyed it. I always find that to be really rewarding, because it shows that there's a purpose for you to be there, and just making new friends and learning about what everyone else is doing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of, everybody seems to do something kind of different, which is what they most get out of conferences. So it's really interesting to hear the different perspectives. Now, something that also affects a lot of us, which I think, Kim, you also touched on in your story, is how do you deal with the imposter syndrome? How do you deal with submitting to a conference and then getting up on stage and thinking, oh my goodness, they're going to realize that I don't actually know what I'm talking about? Any advice for people who are feeling that?
I'll tell you an experience that happened in Tokyo, and maybe from the response you'll understand how I had to approach it. So I'm in Tokyo, we'd finished, a gentleman came up to me and he goes, oh, that was a very good talk, but I don't understand why you're here doing that. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're not an engineer. You're not an automation, engineer. I was a tester at that time. And I said, okay. I said, I get where you're coming from. But do you know why they asked me? And he said, why? And I said, because I know things you don't. That's the reason. And I had to keep saying that in my head, because, to be honest, I've had this quite a lot through me, because I've changed my professions, changed all sorts of things. And many times I get this feeling that maybe I can't do this, or because I don't have a degree and I didn't have the formal kind of pathway. But, I do pros and cons. I don't know if anybody does that, hypothesis, experimental results. So looking at, is this a reality? No, yes, no, and breaking it all down. I think you need to challenge that voice in your head, right? Narrative.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is something I just live with these days. I don't think it really goes away. Every time there is something new that you haven't caught up and you're talking about concepts, you always judge yourself. Like, I would feel that we ourselves are the harshest critics on our own work. So we always think like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough, but this is not going to go away. I think one of the best people have imposter syndrome. So it's really just fine to ignore it. Just do the best. Prepare for your content. I would say this over and over. Prepare well so that you feel at least confident. You can't just simply ignore imposter syndrome, is what I think from my personal experience. It's going to come back.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is something I'm constantly dealing with. And actually my very first conference talk was on imposter syndrome. And it was a lock note at a conference. And actually a portion of my talk was talking about how I was an imposter, feeling like an imposter in that situation. So I kind of, try to use it to help feed my talk. But I have a blog post actually I can share about my experience with imposter syndrome as well. But I try to just, try to reflect on the things that I've done, but then also think of, you know, if in my head I'm saying like, oh, it must be a mistake for them to give me this talk or whatever. But then I'm like, well, even if it is a mistake, I'm just going to go in and do it awesome and prove them wrong if they think I can't do it, or prove myself wrong, and sort of use it to sort of drive me to, you know, get through it and do a good job at it.
Yeah. I think that's definitely, Melissa, I had a similar advantage. So my first conference talk was on failure. And I talked about how it's okay to fail. And then right at the end of the talk, I said that one of my examples of me embracing the chance that I might fail was this talk, because I was giving my first conference talk. And I was kind of aware of the fact that the organizers knew that it was my first talk, but I hadn't sort of directly addressed it to them until that point. And yeah, a lot of them had forgotten that I hadn't actually done it before until I addressed it in my talk. But it was great, because then if I completely failed at giving the talk, it was just an example of how failing is okay. So it does definitely help when your first talk, it can you've got that flexibility. So yeah, that's really interesting. We've got one question from Vito as well. So Susan has asked, would you recommend people new to tech try to become a tech speaker, or do you think it's something for people who are further along in their career and may have a bit more knowledge or expertise to share? So I would actually kind of like to put my 2 cents in with this one as well, because I'm a firm believer that yes, everybody should be looking at doing it if it's something they want to do. I was about a year or 2 into my tech career when I got involved, because as Kim said, I know something they don't know. So I'm a firm believer that everyone has a different perspective. And also when you've just been through a learning experience, you can offer very fresh experiences to your talk. Yeah. So anybody else have anything they would like to say? Anybody disagree with me?
No, I think you're pretty spot on. What I would say is most of the time we overestimate what people know and think that, oh, they probably know this basic stuff or this getting started content. If you are getting started on something and you're really good at it, you feel like, oh, I know the base of this, you can start speaking, because most of the people you might think know this, but they actually don't know. And the biggest proof for that is all these basic concepts and contents out there have more views, more likes, more people engaging than other advanced topics. So that's how you know that these things are really in demand. So I would say go for it. If you're comfortable, go for it. Go for the basics.
Yep.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, tech is changing so fast as well that often the people who are just getting into it, you know, they're the ones that know the latest, newest stuff. And so people who have been in tech for a while, that's stuff that we should be knowing and should be learning. So it's really useful to have those people who have it fresh in their minds, have just learned it, to come out and tell us how it all works and what the new updates are and how things have changed.
Completely agree with everybody. Please apply. You know, it's because I think it's important. We need different perspectives and fresh ideas, fresh views. That's what's going to make tech amazing moving forward. So yeah, absolutely, please do.
We also have another question as well on a similar vein, which is from Aksh, which is, at what point of learning or working on a technology do you feel that you've known enough to give a talk on it?
When you feel confident about doing that piece, I would say from my experience, I would work on something and I would know, okay, in and out, how it works, how it flows. It might be a very simple thing. It doesn't have to be the complex scenarios, but you know, I know from end to end how to get from A to B. And then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to share. I can write an article about it, or I could do a video about it, and then I'm more confident. And then once you know that you can at least talk for 10 minutes on what you did, you're good to go. You can start off thinking about speaking about it.
You know, one of the things they talk about when you're trying to explain something to an audience is, do you know the knowledge? Do you understand it enough to be able to explain it in simplistic form, like to a 5-year-old? So yeah, I can explain blockchain to a 5-year-old because it's Lego bits, But that's the level that you need to get at to be able to, because you're comfy, just like Rabina said. It's about being comfortable in the knowledge and that you can explain it at any level within your capabilities.
I personally never feel like I know enough to give a talk on tech, but I kind of just push myself to do it anyways. And, as long as you have content, and a lot of times for me, what I like to do is find demos and examples set up by other people. So like recently I did some examples with some Microsoft technology, and they have a whole bunch of full working demos that are already done for you. So if you just walk through some of those, people are still learning stuff and enjoying stuff. So you don't always have to do the leverage hard work yourself if you're not feeling 100% confident with it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's I kind of believe the same thing. I go a little bit further though, in that I will find something I want to learn about. I will write a talk proposal on it, and then when it gets accepted, I will learn the top. That will push me to learn the topic so that I can write and give the talk. But I
have done this. Yes.
Yeah. I also like the point about explaining something to a 5-year-old. So I actually saw a talk by an author, Chris Ferry, at a conference a couple of years ago, and he literally writes children's books on. So I actually have Blockchain for Babies, which I feel like gives me enough understanding of blockchain that I need to know. He also did a really great book on Schrodinger's cat, which is in Dr. Seuss style. It's amazing. So yes, you can definitely explain something simple enough for a 5-year-old. So just so that we can wrap up as well and try and bring everything back on time. There's a few more questions coming in, but we might try and answer them in the chat rather than on stream. Before we finish up though, if you could give one piece of advice to a future speaker, what would it be?
I would say just apply. You never know where you're going to be accepted, and especially now that everything's virtual, it's a lot easier to speak at conferences all over the world. So if you even if you just write one talk and send it to 10 different places, it increases your chances that much by getting into a conference, and doing both big and small as well.
Yeah, I want to add a different piece. I agree completely with what Melissa says, but I would say that also educate yourself on a bit about public speaking with code of conduct, because it's so important. I attended the GD CFP workshop last year with code of conduct. There's a whole lot of different things that you probably need to keep in mind when doing your speaking. You have to take care of things in a good way, so it can be inclusive. So I would suggest going to one of these workshops, or at least looking up these things. Technical stuff, yes, but also be mindful of few things. So that would be helpful. It helped me a lot.
Yep.
I think don't give up. So don't give up, and don't give in to the narrative that sits in your head. So the feelings that you have that have come from wherever, you need to challenge them, and you need to just push forward, and don't stop, because it's, look, I did it last year. I turned down a workshop. What an idiot. But I had the narrative in my head that said I couldn't do it. But, don't give up is all that I'd say. And, reach out to me, us, whatever. And where we can, we'll help.
Yeah, and if I could add one more thing, is show your personality. Don't forget that. Don't become someone else when you're speaking. Just be yourself. I think that shines through a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely an excellent piece of advice to finish up on, Rabia. One of my friends who also speaks at conferences, her outfit will match her slides, and that's her thing, and it's amazing. I definitely think that's a great piece of advice. Thank you very much to all three of you for joining me on the panel here today. We're covering some amazing content, and hopefully our audience is able to benefit as much as I am, because there's some really awesome piece of advice that we're touching on today. So we're going to take another 10-minute break. So we're going to be back in 10 minutes with our next panel. So thank you very much for everyone joining me, and we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
bye.